Have you ever felt fear like an uninvited guest quietly sitting inside your chest, even when everything around you seems fine? Sometimes, there's no clear reason for the anxiety. You just know your heart's beating faster, your mind's spinning, and sleep seems to shrink night after night. That's what it feels like to live with fear, without knowing how to name it. I once met a man in his 50s, successful, with a loving family. But when retirement approached, he suddenly felt lost. It wasn't about money. It was the fear of losing his role. The fear of becoming invisible in a world where he used to be at the center. And then there was a young mother, just in her early 30s, who said every time her child ran a slight fever, she felt her heart tighten, not because she was weak, but because love and fear of loss often live side by side in a mother's heart. So let me gently ask you, what fear is living inside of you, one you haven't dared to name? Is it the fear of losing someone? The fear of being misunderstood? Of change? Or simply, the fear of your own emotions? If you've ever lived with fear like that, know this: you're not alone. In the Buddhist teachings, fear isn't something to hide or be ashamed of. It's a very real part of the human experience. But the important thing is you are not a victim of fear. Buddhism offers us deep, compassionate insights to understand the roots of fear and how to gently put it down like a burden we've carried too long, not by suppressing it, not by running from it, but through understanding, mindfulness, and compassion. And in today's video, we're going to walk through 8 teachings from the Buddha that can help you transform fear not just in your mind, but in everyday life, at work, in your relationships, in each breath you take. So let's begin this journey together slowly, mindfully, and with a lot of love. 1. Letting go of clinging. Happiness doesn't come from holding on. There are things in life, the harder we try to hold on to them, the more easily they slip away. And there are fears that don't come from any real danger, but from the anxiety of losing something we're holding on to too tightly. Many people have shared with me that they struggle to sleep, not because of physical pain, but because of the quiet unease that lingers inside. What if they leave me? If I lose this job, who will I be? If others no longer see me the same way, am I still worthy? And so, we tighten our grip, hoping to control what can't be controlled. But ask yourself, have you ever clung so tightly to a relationship that it actually grew more distant? Or worked so hard to maintain the image of being strong and successful that you ended up exhausted trying to hold it all together? Or feared the loss of a role, status, or title that even the slightest change made your heart race? The Buddha called this tanha craving, or attachment. It's the root of suffering. It's not love that causes pain. It's the clinging to the belief that, I have to have this to be happy. They have to stay. That success must be mine. And when those things are threatened, fear rises. At a small monastery in California, I once heard a woman in her 60s share her story. In my youth, I did everything to keep the family together. I was afraid if I wasn't good enough, my husband would leave. So I gave up my career, my hobbies, even my health. And yet, he still left. And I lost my sense of self. Not because he was gone, but because I didn't know who I was without being his wife. That pain is real, and she's not alone. So many people, men and women, young and old, live entangled in things they believe they must have to feel whole. But the Buddha taught, whatever is born must die. Whatever comes together will fall apart. Clinging to impermanence brings suffering. Love, status, reputation, they're like clouds drifting across the sky. You can appreciate them, but try to hold on to a cloud and you'll either lose it or lose yourself in the process. Letting go doesn't mean we stop loving. It means we let go of the illusion that we can control everything to avoid loss. When you understand that, you no longer live in fear that tomorrow everything might change. Because, change is part of life, and there's nothing wrong with that. A father once said to his daughter before he passed, "I can't be with you forever, but remember, real love doesn't need to be held on to because it never truly leaves." And that applies to everything we've ever loved. If we can let go mindfully, then what's meant to stay will stay, and what's meant to go will go peacefully. We can't always choose our circumstances, but we can choose how we respond. Letting go doesn't make us weak, it makes us lighter. It's not about giving up everything. It's about releasing the burden of, "I must hold this no matter what." And when your happiness is no longer tied to anything outside of you, then the fear of losing loses its power over your life. If there's something in your heart that's causing unease, a relationship, a role, a personal expectation, just pause. Take a deep breath and ask yourself, am I gripping something that was never mine to control? Because sometimes it's only when you let go that you realize your hands were always whole. And life, even when it doesn't go your way, still opens up new paths, if your heart is light enough to walk them. 2. Practicing compassion, loving yourself and all beings. One late evening at the monastery, after a long meditation session, someone asked a question that brought the entire room into stillness. "Teacher, how do I feel less afraid when I'm alone in my suffering?" It wasn't a question that needed an immediate answer, because sometimes silence itself is the answer. In that silence, there was only the breath and one thing that mattered most, the presence of compassion. No one has ever lived without fear, and when fear shows up, the human instinct is to resist it, run away, or pretend it's not there. But there's another way, softer and deeper, to hold fear in the arms of compassion, not to force it to disappear, but to recognize it, breathe with it, and gently whisper to ourselves, "I see you. There's fear here, and I offer love to myself right in this very moment." A lot of people think compassion is only for others. But on the path of inner work, the first lesson is learning how to love ourselves, not in a selfish way, not by indulging or blaming, but by accepting that even in our fear, even in our trembling, we are still worthy of love. Still, compassion doesn't stop with just ourselves. True compassion has no borders. It's like sunlight. It doesn't choose where to shine. It doesn't care who's family and who's stranger. In moments of deep anxiety, try imagining this. Somewhere, right now, there's someone, maybe a mother in India, worried for her child, a retired veteran sitting alone in his small apartment, a young adult grieving a loss no one knows about. And with that awareness, send out a quiet wish. May I be safe. May anyone out there who's afraid feel the same peace I'm longing for. That's how the heart begins to expand. And when the heart is no longer locked inside the small self, fear begins to soften. It no longer swirls like a storm inside you. It becomes a gentle mist, lighter, quieter, and eventually fades. The Buddha taught, hatred does not cease by hatred. Only through love can hatred be overcome. The same goes for fear. It doesn't dissolve through force or denial. It eases only when seen clearly and held gently in the light of compassion. In one metta meditation, an elderly man once said something that brought tears to everyone's eyes. "Today, I'm not asking for anything for myself. I just hope someone out there who's hurting like me feels a little lighter." And that was the moment he began to heal. Not because the world changed, but because his heart had changed. When the heart is no longer confined by personal pain, but starts to reach out, that very reaching becomes the medicine that heals us, first and foremost. Compassion isn't always some grand act. Sometimes It's just a kind glance toward yourself after a rough day. It's a gentle thought. It's okay. I'm only human, learning how to grow. It's a silent question. Is there someone out there feeling just like me right now? And it's a quiet wish sent out in meditation. May all beings be at peace. May all beings be free from fear, hatred, and suffering. Compassion, then, is not a luxury, it's essential. Because when the heart is big enough to hold the fear of many, the fear within us suddenly becomes much, much smaller. So if something's scaring you right now, try turning inward. And instead of asking, how do I get rid of this fear? Ask yourself, can I love myself and all those who are hurting even in this moment? Then, quietly, send out a blessing. Because who knows, at that very same moment, someone you've never met might just breathe a little easier because they received a nameless wave of compassion that started with you. 3. Cultivating patience. Not everything needs to be fast. Have you ever found yourself getting impatient? Even with the smallest things. Waiting for an email. Waiting for a message from someone you care about. Waiting for test results. Waiting for something better to happen. And while you wait, fear starts creeping in. What if I never hear back? What if the worst actually happens? What if things don't turn out the way I hope? Modern life feels like a car with no brakes. Everything's built to be faster, more efficient, more optimized. But the human mind doesn't work like a machine. It needs time to process emotions, to understand what's really happening, to grow from the inside out. And when the pace outside keeps pushing, the inside starts to panic. In Buddhist teachings, there's a beautiful word, khanti, which means patience. But it's not the kind of patience that feels like heavy endurance. It's a calm, steady kind of strength. It's not because we have no other choice, but because we understand everything ripens in its own time. Someone once shared this story. For over 10 years, I tried to repair my relationship with my father. Every conversation felt like walking on eggshells, and at one point I thought, maybe he'll never understand me. But then, one day, he gently placed his hand on my shoulder, said nothing, and in that silence, I knew something had shifted. Not quickly, but genuinely. Patience is a form of deep compassion. Compassion for others who aren't ready to understand. Compassion for ourselves when we're still figuring things out. And compassion for life, because it doesn't run on our personal timeline. Fear often grows from restlessness, wanting answers right now, wanting peace right now, wanting to heal overnight just because we've meditated for a few days. But just like a tree, if you dig up the roots every day to see if they've grown, the tree won't survive. In the Sutra of 42 chapters, the Buddha taught, sow the seed, wait for the fruit. If you rush to pick it before it's ripe, all you'll taste is bitterness. This isn't just true for spiritual practice. It's true for love, forgiveness, healing, purpose, even peace. At a winter retreat, someone asked, how do I stop worrying when the future feels so uncertain? And the answer was simple. You don't have to see the whole path right now. Just be still enough to take one solid step, and the next step will appear. The mind doesn't like uncertainty. It doesn't like not knowing. But that space, the space in between, is where growth happens. Patience doesn't mean sitting around waiting for something to fall from the sky. It means breathing deeply with what is here, doing your best today without forcing results to show up on your schedule. A farmer can't rush a seed to grow, but every day he waters, he clears the weeds, he lets the sunlight in because he believes in the harvest. And so does the spiritual practitioner. You don't need to wake up overnight. Just be a little kinder than yesterday, a little more present than yesterday, Be patient with yourself the way the earth is patient with every rain, every season. Fear softens when we stop demanding instant answers. Instead of pushing everything to move faster, try trusting the process. Because sometimes the slowest things are the most lasting. So if you're in a foggy season right now, no answers, no clarity, no direction, don't rush. Come back to your breath. And remember, if today you have enough patience to take just one more step, then fear is no longer leading your life. 4. Reflecting on impermanence. Everything changes. We've all had moments that felt like they would never end. A deep ache in the heart. A goodbye that came too soon. Sleepless nights filled with anxiety. And in those moments, the mind often whispers, I don't know how much longer I can go through this. But then, one day, maybe while making tea or walking in the early morning light, you suddenly realize, I made it through. It doesn't come like a lightning bolt. There's no drum roll, no big announcement. It comes quietly, the way time always moves forward, whether we notice it or not. That's the nature of impermanence. And impermanence, in its quiet wisdom, teaches us something simple yet powerful. Nothing lasts forever. Not even pain. Many of us carry deep fears. Fear of losing a loved one. Fear of aging. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of no longer being loved the same way. To deal with those fears, we often try to control everything: our emotions, other people, even the future. But life isn't a blueprint. It's a river, sometimes gentle, sometimes wild. And the more we try to grip the water, the more it slips through our fingers. In the Buddhist teaching on anicca impermanence, he said, all conditioned things are impermanent. What arises will cease. What comes together will part. What begins will end. It may sound sad at first, but it's actually one of the most comforting truths, because it frees us from the fear of loss. If everything changes, then fear itself doesn't last forever either. I remember a woman once shared her story. Her husband passed away in an accident, and for a whole year, she felt lost. All she could do was sit with old photos and wait, hoping something would shift. And then one day, while watering the plants on her porch, she cried, but not from despair. She said, "That was the first time I cried softly. Not a breakdown, just gentle." She said, "I didn't get over the grief, but time and impermanence helped me live with it more gently." And that's the quiet gift of impermanence. It doesn't ask us to forget. It doesn't demand that we be strong. It simply whispers, "This too shall pass." Impermanence isn't about being detached or cold. In fact, it helps us treasure things more. Because we know nothing lasts forever, we learn to love deeper, forgive faster, and slow down enough not to miss what truly matters. It's thanks to impermanence that even our darkest nights can become the foundation for light. No darkness lasts forever, and no light should be taken for granted. When we understand this, we stop getting arrogant when things go well, and we stop beating ourselves up when they don't. Once, a meditation student asked, "How do I stop being afraid when everything around me keeps changing so fast?" The teacher smiled and said, "Change with it." That's the wisdom of someone who's come to understand impermanence. They no longer fight to make things stand still. Instead, they learn to flow, to adapt, to respond with mindfulness. Impermanence can hurt when we cling, but it can also set us free when we let go. Because if all emotions pass, then sadness will pass. If all situations change, then tomorrow can be lighter than today. So, if right now you're facing something that brings fear, confusion, or pain, close your eyes for a moment and gently whisper to yourself, "This too shall pass." Not as a way to escape, but as a loving reminder that no feeling, no moment lasts forever. not even the ones that shake us the most. 5. Understanding the first noble truth. Fear is part of being human. Some days, fear arrives quietly. Like a breeze brushing across your chest, no one sees it, but you feel it deeply. A vague sense of unease. A distant bell ringing inside. Am I really okay? Are my loved ones safe? Am I being left behind? Nothing dramatic happens. There's no crisis, no clear reason, but fear still shows up simply as part of being alive. In the Buddha's teaching of the Four Noble Truths, he didn't begin by promising an escape from suffering. He began with something more grounded, more honest, the truth of suffering dukkha. He didn't say suffering means you failed. He didn't say you must be unworthy if you're afraid or anxious. Even seasoned monks, those who've spent thousands of hours in meditation, can feel fear when something unexpected hits. And that doesn't mean they've failed. It means they're human. At its core, fear isn't our enemy. It's just a natural response when we face uncertainty, the unknown, or a loss of control. We've all been there. Someone once came to me after losing his job. It wasn't about the paycheck, it was that the job felt like a part of who he was. Without it, he said, "I don't know who I am anymore." And then he asked, "Why am I so weak?" I told him, "Because you're human." That's it. When we start to see fear as something universal, not shameful, not a personal defect, our hearts begin to soften. Just like a crying child doesn't need advice, they need a hug. When you're scared, what you need first is not judgment, but gentleness. I remember a retreat in Oregon. Someone broke down crying when the teacher said, "There's nothing wrong with being afraid. The only mistake is believing you're the only one." And with that one sentence, a sense of relief spread through the hall. The isolation melted. And in its place, "Oh, I'm not alone." Fear grows in isolation. It whispers that you're the weakest, the most broken. But that's not true. Fear visits everyone, the successful and the struggling, people in love and people heartbroken, a young adult figuring out life, and a 70-year-old facing the quiet of old age. Once we understand that, our hearts open to ourselves, to others. That smiling person you just passed, they might be shaking inside. Your strong, silent loved one, they might be scared too, just not saying it out loud. So instead of waiting for people, or ourselves, to be perfect to be loved, we learn to love, even through the trembling. The Buddha said, "Beings suffer because of ignorance, but no being is beyond compassion." That includes fear. It doesn't need to be cast out. It just needs to be seen with mindfulness, held with compassion. And when we truly understand the universal nature of suffering, including fear, something begins to shift. The heart stops resisting, and healing begins. Just like a wound heals when it's not hidden, not poked at, not resented, just gently cared for, your fear heals too, when you stop pushing it away. So if something right now is making you uneasy, don't rush to get rid of it. Look at it, sit with it, and whisper to yourself, "Every human has felt fear. I don't have to be perfect to be worthy of love." That simple acceptance is the first step toward real compassion. And, strangely enough, what once felt like weakness can become the foundation of your deepest strength. 6. Seeing through illusion. Fear is just a story in your head. Have you ever been sitting quietly? Nothing's actually happening, but your heart starts beating faster, and then your mind kicks in, spinning out those familiar questions. What if something bad happens? What if they misunderstand me? What if I'm not good enough? Before you even realize it, a full-blown movie has started playing in your head, dramatic, messy, filled with anxiety, all about things that haven't even happened and might never happen. But the feeling? It's real. It hits you like it just happened. That's how the mind creates illusion. Most of the time, fear doesn't come from what's actually happening. It comes from what we think might happen. Not from reality, but from the stories the mind is telling us about reality. The Buddha once taught, mind is the forerunner of all things. Mind is their chief. Mind made are they. If one speaks or acts with an impure mind, suffering follows, as the wheel follows the foot of the ox. And one of the most common forms of impurity is this. We believe in things that don't even exist yet. I remember a young meditation student at a retreat. She said, "Every time I have a job interview, I can't sleep, not because I'm unqualified, but because I keep imagining them rejecting me, laughing at me, turning me down. By the time I walk in, I've already lost my confidence." That's a perfect example of an untested story in the mind, but with very real power. Why does it happen? Because we don't just live in reality. We live in our interpretation of reality. And without mindfulness, those stories keep playing on autopilot like an old tape loop. We think we're living in the present, but really, we're just replaying old mental episodes based on past wounds or future worries. Here's the most important truth. Fear is not the truth. It's just a thought. A thought, nothing more. But if we don't recognize that, we start living as if that thought is our destiny. One longtime practitioner once told me, "There was a time I was convinced I had a serious illness. No doctor could find anything, but I felt chest pain, shortness of breath. It wasn't until I sat in stillness and looked deeply that I realized it wasn't sickness. It was unrecognized fear. And just like that, as if someone turned on the light, things became clear. There was nothing to fear. It was just the mind creating fog, and I'd believed it for too long. But with mindfulness, something shifts. We stop getting swept away by thoughts. We start watching them instead. We see thoughts come and go. We see fear arise and dissolve. No clinging, no reacting. No need to believe everything that shows up. You can simply sit still, breathe slow, and say to yourself, this is fear. But it's not the truth. It's just a passing cloud. And then it passes. Just like standing in front of a shadow on the wall, if you don't realize it's just a shadow, it can feel terrifying. But once you turn the light on, you see, there's nothing there. Fear works the same way. It lives in the shadowy corners of the mind. But when the light of awareness shines on it, it vanishes, like morning mist under the sun. So if you're feeling a vague anxiety right now, a fear you can't quite name, don't rush to believe it. Pause, take a breath, and gently ask, am I making this up? Is this a story I'm telling myself? One no one else has confirmed? And sometimes, just that simple act of awareness is enough to step out of the mental spiral and return to the present moment, where fear no longer has the final say. 7. Grateful for fear, because it helps us grow. Gratitude is probably the last thing on anyone's mind when fear shows up. When your heart is pounding, your hands are shaking, and you're overwhelmed with anxiety, how could you possibly say, thank you? But if you take a moment to look back on your journey, you might notice something unexpected. It was during your scariest moments that transformation began. The times you thought you wouldn't survive those became the foundation for a stronger, deeper version of you. I once heard a story from a Buddhist practitioner that has stayed with many people. She used to be terrified of public speaking. Just saying her name in a meeting would dry out her throat. But then, when her father passed away, no one in the family was able to speak at the funeral. So she stepped forward holding the mic, with trembling hands. She said, "My heart was beating like a drum, but I knew if I didn't speak, I'd regret it forever. And in that moment, with a shaky voice and tear-filled eyes, I met a new part of myself. Not because I was more skilled, but because I showed up, fully, with all my truth, with all my vulnerability. That's the real nature of fear. It's not an enemy. It's a silent teacher." The Buddha never said that spiritual practitioners should never feel fear. He taught us to walk through fear with mindfulness so we can see clearly what lies on the other side. And every time you make it through a fear, even just a small one, another part of your inner freedom gets unlocked. Fear may not feel pleasant, but if we can stay with it, observe it, and meet it with understanding, it becomes like a mirror, an honest one. No filters, no masks. It shows us what we're clinging to, where we're shaky, and where we still need healing. In meditation practice, there are nights when everything is quiet outside, but inside, the fear gets loud. Fear of dying. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of living a life without meaning. And in those moments, practitioners don't try to push fear away. They sit. They breathe with it. They learn to call it by its true name. This is fear. It's here, and it too will pass. There is no light more radiant than the one that flickers into being after darkness. And no freedom more profound than the moment you realize, "I just walked through something I once thought would break me." The Buddha said, "Just like a lotus doesn't grow in dry soil, it rises from the mud." Likewise, resilience, compassion, and deep mindfulness, they're not born in peaceful, easy times. They're shaped in difficulty, in chaos, in falling down and standing up again. So instead of saying, "I wish I'd never been afraid," you might begin to say, "Thank you. Thank you, trembling hands, because you led me closer to my own strength." If you're going through something hard right now, if there's a quiet fear whispering inside, pause for a moment. Don't rush to push it away. Instead, maybe smile just a little and whisper to yourself, maybe this is a gift, wrapped in wrapping I don't yet understand. Because even though you didn't invite them in, your fears have slowed you down, helped you look inward, and guided you to grow. Not in a loud, flashy way, but in the quietest, most enduring way possible. 8. Mindfulness practice. Coming back to the present moment. Sometimes, what causes the most suffering isn't what actually happened. It's what already passed, but we're still clinging to, or what hasn't happened yet, but we're already worrying about. The human mind has a strange habit. Even when the body is here, in the now, the mind is either replaying the past or rushing toward the future. Rarely does it stay still long enough to truly live in the present moment. And that's when fear slips in. When the mind turns to the past, regret, guilt, and shame show up. When it runs toward the future, anxiety, uncertainty, and restlessness arise. Meanwhile, the present, the only place where life actually happens, is forgotten. In the Buddhist teachings, there is a fundamental but profound practice. Mindfulness, sati. Mindfulness isn't about forcing the mind to go blank. It's not about trying to think positive all the time. Mindfulness simply means being fully present with what is without judging, without resisting, without running away. Breathing in, you know you're breathing in. Breathing out, you know you're breathing out. No rushing, no distraction. Just returning to what is happening right now, in your body, in your mind. One man once shared his experience after years of battling anxiety. He joined a silent retreat. No phones, no talking, just his breath and his footsteps. At first, his mind was restless. It kept bringing up worries he hadn't resolved. But after a few days, when all that remained were morning bird songs, the scent of warm tea, and the feeling of his feet on the earth, he suddenly realized, I've missed so much of life just by fearing what hasn't even come. When truly practiced, mindfulness is like a lamp illuminating the maze of the mind. Each anxious thought, instead of becoming a flood, turns into just a passing cloud. Each fear, instead of paralyzing us, becomes just a gentle ripple on the surface. Because once we see it clearly, it no longer controls us. The Buddha taught, the mind is the root of all things. If we keep it in mindfulness, peace is possible wherever we are. Not because life stops being chaotic, but because our mind no longer gets lost in that chaos. One of the deepest fears many people have isn't even death. It's uncertainty, not knowing what's next. But mindfulness teaches us something essential. We don't have to know where everything is going. We just need to know that right now, we are here fully one moment at a time. An elderly monk once said, we can't hold the whole future, but we can hold a cup of tea. It's that simple. When your mind is truly in the cup of tea, there's no room for fear to sneak in. In a world that constantly demands speed, fast responses, fast success, mindfulness is like a quiet revolution. It doesn't ask you to change your entire life overnight. It simply invites you to live more deeply, starting with your very next breath. So, if you're feeling worn down by nameless worries, just pause for a moment. You don't have to meditate for hours. Just sit still. Place a hand over your heart. Breathe slowly and whisper to yourself, I am here, right now, and that is enough. Fear is just a cloud, and mindfulness is the sky. Clouds come and they go, but the sky remains spacious, calm, and full of room for everything. And with that, we've just walked through 8 quiet but powerful teachings the Buddha left behind to help us recognize, understand, and gently transform fear, not by fighting it, not by pretending to be stronger than everyone else, but simply by coming home to ourselves, softening, opening our hearts, and staying awake to what is. Fear may not vanish overnight, but with mindfulness to see it, compassion to embrace it and all beings, and wisdom to know this too shall pass, fear can no longer control us. If there's one thing I hope stays with you after everything we've explored together, let it be this quiet truth. You are not alone on this path through fear, and within you, there has always been everything you need for peace. If today's reflection offered you something meaningful, please subscribe to Buddhism Seeds so we can keep walking this path of awakening together. Don't forget to hit like to help spread this gentle message to others. Share this video with someone who might need a moment of stillness. And leave a comment below. Let me know what touched you most. Or simply write, I'm listening. Thank you for being here, exactly as you are. And may peace be with you in every breath.